Okay, so we are being live streamed, and I want to welcome everyone here today. I will go through the participant list here in Zoom just to make sure that I have everyone. If I don't call your name, let me know. I see Lynn Wilkuski, David Wooden, Fred Mastriani, Linda Vonderheide, Chaim Simon, um, Ivan Vamos, Charles Welge, Darlene McGraw, Dennis Gaffney, Liz King, Ethan Warren, Jeanette Cato Marino, Jennifer Hogan, Jim Merkel, Lindsay Brett, Peter Knutson, Rima Shemaya, Sam Morial, Tina Carton, Valerie Dean, and Wally Elton. Did I miss anybody? Okay. So today, just a reminder, since we are meeting virtually, please be sure to keep yourself muted while there are presentations or discussions happening that you're not part of. Please feel free to use the chat and or raise your hand if you would like to ask a question or a comment. Today we have a presentation on the Patron Creek Greenway feasibility study. Then we have several discussion items, some other updates, and that should be it for us. Just as a reminder, there's been no change to CDTC's COVID policies. We're still in the office, but asking visitors to make an appointment and having most of our meetings virtual. Planning committee and policy board is hybrid. And as we move into TIP programming, we're asking voting members to attend in person for voting. So with that said, I just wanted to introduce everyone. CDTC has a new staff member, Chaim Simon. He just joined us last Monday, so he'll be working, he'll be assisting with linkage and a lot of other projects and programs. So if you get an email from him or see him at a meeting, he is a fellow CDTC employee. Welcome him, and we'll also have another new staff person starting next week that we are looking forward to introducing to everybody. So with that, I'm going to pass this to Liz King. Liz, I'm going to make you a co-host. And then I think you should be able to share your screen. Let me know if you have any problems.
I think I got it.
Yep.
So thanks for having me today. It's really nice to be here with you. As Jen said, I'm Liz King with Bergman, and we've been working with CDTC and Jen on the Patron Creek Greenway feasibility study really since July in the summer of last year. So I just wanted to provide a really quick overview of what the study is for those of you that don't know what it is, the goals of the study, the overall project schedule, and then talk a little bit about the alternatives analysis that we're conducting right now and give you an introduction to what those different trail alternatives are that we're considering for the Patron Creek Greenway, and then talk a little bit about just some upcoming public engagement and current opportunities to provide feedback. So the purpose of the study, and this is in partnership both with CDTC and the City of Albany, is to identify a feasible trail corridor, a multi-use trail corridor between Albany's Hudson River to the east and 6 Mile Waterworks, and really the gateway into the Albany Pine Bush to the west. This corridor is about 9 miles long and would provide a really important east-west connection for cyclists, pedestrians, and other forms of active transportation in the city. I'm sure, as a lot of you know, a lot of our multi-use paths in the city run north-south along the Hudson River, and this would provide a lot of opportunities to connect to local destinations, neighborhoods, and other city resources. So we're really building on the 2004 Patron linkage study, almost 20 years old now, but this does show that proposed alignment that they had identified, really using the I-90 corridor for a majority of the trail route. And then really once, just east of Tivoli, between Tivoli and the Hudson River, looking at a couple of different alternatives to get down to the waterfront. So we're using this as a foundation, but we have identified a couple other alternatives to this trail corridor. And really some of the overarching goals that I just wanted to highlight as part of this study are, one, making safe, accessible connections to both the Greenway and local neighborhoods with a focus on equitable access to any future proposed trail facilities. Also making sure that the Greenway is connecting not only to neighborhoods and where people live, but also to the various recreational, economic, educational, and social resources that the city provides, both the city of Albany, but then also looking at opportunities to connect to the town of Colony, recognizing that there's a lot of, there's limited north-south connectivity between the two municipalities. Another major goal of the study is just to enhance the quality of life in the cities, from the city's attractiveness as a place to live, but also expanding public space and increasing mobility options, and then improving public health. So looking at opportunities to expand active transportation, make it a viable form of transportation, and improve air quality by reducing emissions. So I just wanted to kind of place this in a regional context. The Patron Creek Greenway, I don't know if you all can see my cursor, but it's right here, kind of in the bottom middle, highlighted with a solid orange line with green around it. But it's a really important kind of component of CDTC and the region's vision for its trail system moving forward. It connects to several other future trails that provide connectivity over to Rensselaer, to Schenectady, and tie into the Empire State Trail system. So this is a priority connection, not only within the city, but also within the region. So just a quick overview of kind of the scope components of our project and how they're going to play out really over the next couple of months. So we've completed an existing conditions report that was wrapped up last fall, and that really formed kind of the basis for the identification of trail alignments and the evaluation that we've been performing now. We're close to wrapping up our alignment analysis. We do have a public survey open right now to get the public's input on the different trail alternatives. And I'll provide a link to that right at the end of the presentation too. So if you haven't responded already, we'd love your feedback. Once we get through the alignment analysis, we'll be using that to work with, we have a couple different project committees, one that's more technical, one that's a citizen advisory committee, to identify what the preferred alignments are. And then we'll be putting together an action plan for what are some of the immediate and long-term next steps to get the Greenway built. So the rest of my presentation really focuses on what the alternatives, trail alternatives are that we're exploring. We've kind of broken the entire corridor up into 4 major sections. The western component from Fuller Road to Everett Road. So we'll look at that first and we'll work our way from west to east. And then we also have a couple different alternatives to get between Everett Road and Tivoli Preserve. Then using the really great new trail systems in Tivoli to kind of move through Tivoli and see the newly daylit Patron Creek. And then we have 3 other trail alternatives from Tivoli down to the Hudson River waterfront that I'll introduce. So from Fuller to Everett, we're largely proposing to use the space between I-90 and the railroad. There's a county sewer easement that runs through that space. And there is a fair amount of city-owned property there already. So we've been coordinating with other property owners as well as the county who has the easement in terms of access to that easement and design considerations moving forward with the trail. But these are just a couple images of what that corridor looks like. And it is kind of a cool space where you do have these opportunities of an enclosed linear park feel to more of an open kind of meadow feel. In addition to kind of the corridor trail alignments, we're also looking at some of the main crossings. So the Greenway Trail does and will cross several really busy roads, from Fuller Road to Central Avenue, Everett, I-90. So we're looking at several different options for crossings. So for example, here at Fuller Road, we're looking at some enhanced at-grade crossings, integrating RRFBs or user-activated, essentially flashing beacons, improved and expanded crosswalks. And then also looking at structured crossings that completely separate trail users from vehicle traffic. And I think especially over here at Fuller could be a really, unique and iconic gateway both into the Albany Pine Bush as well as into the Greenway itself. From Everett Road to Tivoli Preserve, there's 3 different options that I mentioned. So I'm just going to walk through those a little bit here with these aerials. The first option looks at once we come off of the county sewer easement at Everett Road, heading north on Everett Road, and then using an exchange street to get under I-90. We've costed out a proposed new tunnel that would be adjacent to the Anderson Tunnel to get under I-90 and then use essentially interstate right-of-way and railroad property to get into this more forested area. And then potentially repurpose existing rail trestles, or depending on the condition, they could also just be replaced with prefabricated structures to get up over the railroad and into Tivoli Preserve. The second option, instead of heading north along Everett, would come off of the county sewer easement and head south on Everett Road. I will note that I know Everett Road and that bridge is really difficult for pedestrians and cyclists. And we will be proposing, and I think, one of the big recommendations moving forward is working with NISDOT as they consider future improvements to Everett Road Bridge and how a multi-use separated path could be integrated into that bridge in the future to really make this a safe separated crossing for pedestrians. So once over Everett, then using Commerce Ave to come through a light industrial area, past Field of Dreams, and then heading south or uphill slightly to Livingston Avenue, half a block on Livingston Avenue, and then using Albany Water Board property to get into Tivoli Preserve. The third option is pretty similar to the one we just looked at, but instead of coming up Terminal at Field of Dreams, we're looking at an alternative that would potentially continue straight down Commerce and then utilize a little bit of private property to come into Tivoli Preserve to provide a little bit more of a direct but also off-road experience for trail users. The next section, Tivoli Preserve, I just wanted to highlight, I'm sure many of you have already been there, but the city's put a lot of made a lot of recent investments in terms of daylighting the creek, building new trail systems within Tivoli. And so we would be looking to kind of build off those existing improvements and really highlighting the beautiful natural resource that the Tivoli Preserve is. And so once on the east side of Tivoli Preserve, that's where we get into our final 3 options to get from Tivoli down to the Albany Skyway. The first option looks at coming up out of Tivoli, up Manning, and then looking at separated on-road facilities, really following Northern Boulevard down Manning to Tenbrook, Clinton, and then connecting into the Albany Skyway. The second option is kind of a variation on what we just looked at, but provides a little bit more of an off-road path. So continuing past Kiptech Valley, using some city-owned property to get under US 9, and then looping behind some of those existing neighborhoods to connect into Lark Drive and Urban Drive, wrapping around Arbor Hill Elementary, and then again coming down Tenbrook to Clinton. And then the third option, maybe more of a long-term vision, but using that off-road route out of Tivoli to get under US 9, and then a new bridge that would get over the railroad to connect to Tivoli Street, and then using Tivoli Street to connect into Broadway, and then taking Broadway down to the Albany Skyway. One of the kind of impetuses behind this alternative was to try and follow Patron Creek as closely as possible. So Patron Creek and the historic kind of pathway was right under Tivoli Street. There's also, I think, quite a bit of, Broadway is one of the key corridors that's identified in the city's bike ped plan. So there are proposed bike and pedestrian facilities along this corridor. So looking at kind of building on some of those future improvements. I'm trying to keep this short so we can have some discussion, but I'll keep my screen up if you all have specific questions about the alternatives. I did just want to highlight a couple of things. We have an open survey right now where we're looking for feedback on those alternative alignments. You can get to it right from the project website. If you just head over to the Get Engaged page, it'll take you right to the survey. So again, if you haven't completed it, we'd love your input. And then we do have a couple upcoming opportunities. We're working with one of our community liaisons to get a tabling event at Albany scheduled in the next couple of weeks to present the alternatives and get feedback from the university students. And then we're hoping as soon as the weather gets a little nicer to have some outdoor events within the community as kind of the project's wrapping up and we can get some final thoughts on what the facility types are that we're recommending, as well as kind of key neighborhood connections into the Greenway. So I will stop. I'd love to answer any questions or any clarifications that you all need. But again, thanks for having me. And
Thanks, Liz.
Of course.
If anyone wants to either type a comment or question in the chat, or just unmute yourself, or if you'd prefer to raise your hand and then unmute, that's fine too. Tina?
Yeah, so this is really exciting, feasibility study. When you're weighing the options, you're looking at bridges over railroad tracks, you're looking at, some things that seem like they might be pretty costly. Have you developed estimates for costs for these different options? So, that can be looked at because and then also the time frame for saying working with different partners like the railroad. We have Canadian, the Canadian Railroad up here, and they tend to be, tends to be very time consuming to work with them. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for each alternative, we have kind of a standardized template that we're putting together in terms of what we're assessing. So that does include planning level cost estimates so we can compare across and understand what those investments are. We're also looking at time frame and flagging, especially any of those kind of, more time consuming steps in terms of working with different property owners, working with utilities, working with the railroad. So yeah, for each alternative, we will have a planning level cost estimate. We do have information in terms of connectivity along that corridor, connectivity to, existing and proposed bike ped infrastructure, as well as connectivity to public transit and kind of local destinations like schools. And we'll also have a section specific to kind of time frame that it would take to implement these different alternatives.
That was a great question, Tina. I really like that. One concern I have is when you're walking a long distance or riding a bike or whatever, we're gonna come up to when we need times to refuel and maybe go to the bathroom. Sometimes in parts of like Albany, especially in these lower parts, there's people that don't, not, on the higher income scale and might have to use their EBT card and need businesses that accept that. I know Stewart's is like one of the first places that I can think of because, their products aren't high cost and they're very friendly, even if you just have to run in to go to the bathroom, and that's amongst my favorite, things that come up to my mind. On these paths, have you thought of like any locations where there's, a Stewart shop on one of these paths or any other businesses that might fit that where, you can refuel and, go to the bathroom where, they'll be friendly enough to, maybe let you just run into the bathroom, without purchasing something or anything of that nature?
So we haven't specifically mapped out those types of destinations that you're mentioning, Darlene. We are as we kind of refine the alignment and where the Greenway Trail goes, and if you go to the survey, we do have one question specific to amenities and types of amenities that people would like to see along the trail, anything from restrooms to water stations to bike fix-it stations. And so we will be kind of, as we're putting together our final recommendations, identifying locations for those new types of services and where it makes sense from like a trailhead perspective, or even just a smaller trailhead where you can get those services. And we've been mapping, I guess, locating some key community destinations, more like schools and neighborhoods, but I'm happy to add some of the other more kind of like food access points as well, especially as we refine the alignment. I think I think
I really
the
like
one
the part where you go over the bridge over Fuller Road versus the crossings, just the regular crosswalk.
Great. Thank you. And we can, that's a good suggestion. So I know we do have honest weight noted, which does take EBT, but we'll see if there's any other kind of food access locations too.
They're just kind of expensive too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
One of those suggestions, if I already mentioned to you by email, the extension along Exchange Road, which goes through the former meatpacking plant, which is being planned and resolved. It's worth getting good contact with the people that are doing that and trying to get an establishment that would provide a cafe and a stop-off point, and negotiating with them that public access to the bathrooms would be a part of the deal. It's a worthwhile thing to resolve right off.
We would be happy to, we would be happy to speak with those that are redeveloping First Prize. And I will mention, I didn't show it here, but we do also, and we've costed out at a really high level, a railroad crossing. So a bridge that would connect the trail directly into the First Prize site. So that is another thing that we'll have in the alignment analysis, is how we could make that direct connection, based on, what you're saying, that is a really important redevelopment site.
Thank you.
And we've had the town of Colony, they're part of our project advisory committee. So, the town and the city are working with the developers of the First Prize site so that, we can keep that in mind as this project goes forward. Jim Merkel put a comment in the chat. He said, when we were going for the Tiger grants, Chris Haver at the Pine Bush Commission was open to an extension westward to New Corner Road, the proposed Albany Loop route. I'm not sure how you get past the landfill though. Yeah, thanks, Jim. We do have the Pine Bushes also on our advisory committee, and they've been, pretty involved and seem interested in how they can connect their properties to this trail. And, they're, I think, excited for, another access to the Pine Bush Preserve. Liz, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I think you captured it, Jen, and I just, I think it's Joel Hecht that sits on our, or I don't know if that was his right last name, but Joel sits on our advisory committee, and we've been talking to about, the desire and how amazing it would be if the Patron Creek Greenway could connect not only into the Pine Bush, but all the way up to the Discovery Center. So I think that gap that you noted has been kind of identified too here, and we can reinforce that and that connection in the study.
Are there any other questions or comments for Liz?
I had a question. This is Dennis Gaffney with the city. This is so exciting. I mean, this would be a major improvement, obviously, in the city's bike infrastructure and So it's really exciting. I was curious about the street routes you're looking at. You mentioned there might be some kind of protected multi-use path along Everett, if that's the route you choose there. But on the other street routes you mentioned, like I guess Exchange or Commercial, are you thinking of striped lanes? Are you thinking protected lanes? Are you looking at both options? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so I can give you a high level. So for Exchange Street, we are looking more at like a shared like roadway just for that short stretch with an improved sidewalk for pedestrians. On Commerce, we're looking at a completely like a separated by a landscape median buffer. The trail would be separated by a landscape median buffer. Really along the length of it, the width of that buffer would change, and whether we could fit landscaping in the whole length might vary, but we are costing out essentially separated trail facilities all the way across Everett and then down Commerce up Terminal and into Tivoli. I think the only place that we are looking only at a shared road situation is on Exchange Street, and then Yardborough, which I'm not showing here, but Yardborough is right as you're approaching Central. It's a short kind of stretch. It's like a mixed use roadway right off of Central, but it's a short block. But for the most part, we're costing out completely separated facilities that would really reinforce, especially where you're in an urban condition adjacent to a roadway, trying to get that Greenway feel as much as possible, where you still have that landscaped separation from cars and introducing, tree canopy and improving the urban forest, at the same time too, where we can. But a lot of these roads actually have quite a bit of right of way, and there is space.
Thank you. That sounds great. In terms of you're talking Sharrows, perhaps, if you choose the Exchange or some of the other parts of it. But is there just a lot of real estate on those roads? Is that why you're thinking that, or?
For the Exchange Street?
Yeah.
I think the Exchange Street is mostly just like, it's a pretty narrow roadway with a lot of driveway access points to all the different businesses. So I think short-term Sharrows just would be a little bit easier. I think long-term, maybe as if land use ever changes or if access along that road changes slightly, I think you could get a more protected facility in there. But it's a pretty low traffic street. And so we were looking at more pedestrian improvements too. So improved and wider sidewalks, introducing some kind of landscape buffers between the road and the sidewalk, and then just a shared roadway for cyclists as, again, short to midterm solution. If that's ultimately the route, I think we would recommend a much longer term option too, that gets more of a trail situation in.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Tina has her hand up.
I just had one other question, because when you're evaluating all these different options, in many of the different options, you're kind of balancing the park-like scenic type of setting versus taking people more through kind of commercial corridors, even maybe residential corridors. And how does that evaluation work? Because one of them, you're being able to access, the businesses, you're able to get to Honest Wade, or you're able to get to, wherever, versus, creating these corridors where really you're more concentrating on having that off-road kind of more scenic park-like experience. And I was just wondering how do you balance those two really kind of competing different experiences?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer for you yet, honestly, Tina. I think some of it's going to be what the public input we get through the survey, in terms of we're getting a lot of comments specific to that and justification of why people are choosing one route over the other. And if they're choosing more of the, if you look at this purple route, if they're choosing this, it's because they want those neighborhood connections, and that's what they're kind of prioritizing. But I think this will be kind of an ongoing discussion over the next month as to what the vision is, and it's not ultimately, we'll present that information and the connectivity information, but work with CDTC and the city and the different committees, as well as all the public input we receive to kind of weigh those options. And we'll also be identifying, maybe the long-term vision for the trail is to be more off-road if that's what is intended, but we could look at some short-term improvements to provide immediate connectivity from the waterfront all the way out to Albany Pine Bush. And those improvements could stay, even if the longer-term vision for the Greenway is for it to be off-road.
Yeah, and Liz, I just wanted to add, in addition to the survey that's available on the website, if you are involved with a school group or neighborhood group that has kids in Albany, we did create a survey that's geared just for youth, to get some youth engagement, and Bergman did an excellent job early in the planning process of setting up some trail demonstration projects and doing pop-up events with schools, doing trunk or treat and getting feedback from kids. We did a neighborhood event. We got lots of kids to kind of draw on maps or write what they would like to see along the trail. And this is, could be an east-west connection that does connect some, neighborhoods and schools that don't have access to a lot of green spaces or recreational opportunities. So getting all that feedback is important. So let us know if if you're working with a group that has kids involved and would like to circulate the survey. We'd be happy to share that. There's a couple of comments in the chat. Darlene noted, the connections to CDTA bus route, which, as Liz said earlier, is something that is being looked at. And then Rogerio said, in cases where the trail goes through nature areas, will there be a plan to preserve and enhance the surrounding nature?
Yeah, so I mean, at a high level, we're kind of identifying those opportunities for like stream restoration, ecological restoration. And we're building into one of our cost estimates, like especially, for example, this is just a very specific example, between Central Ave and Everett, this corridor that's shown here in green is really close to the Patron Creek. So we're doing one cost estimate where it's really just a trail that would move through that space, and then a second cost estimate looking at, okay, if you put a trail through the space and we also paired it with some stream restoration or ecological restoration to make it, enhance the experience overall, as well as the surrounding ecology, what would that cost estimate be? So I think too, as we move into more of our final recommendations, we'll be looking at some recommendations related to like native planting and just planting palettes in general, and how that the landscape can kind of reinforce the different systems that you're moving through from the Pine Bush to Tivoli down to the Hudson River waterfront, and also kind of make this a really unique space.
Okay, so it's past 10:30. I'm sorry, Liz, for keeping you so
I don't
long
mind.
this morning. But we can, if anyone else has any questions or comments, please feel free to send an email. The project website is patrongreenway.com, and you'll find an interactive map with the alignment and a survey and other information. But thank you so much, Liz, for that great presentation.
Yep.
And thank you to everyone for your comments and questions.
Thanks for having me. It was great to see you all.
Yep. Okay, so can everyone see my screen now? Okay, just want to make sure that got this right. Okay, so moving on to the next agenda item is the tip update, the ongoing tip update. As you know, our schedule has already changed multiple times since we announced the tip solicitation. So we have not started programming. Project sponsors have received kind of like their preliminary project scores, and we are meeting with project sponsors about their scores, and we anticipate programming to begin February 16th. So usually planning committee only meets once a month. As you can see, planning committee will meet at least twice in February. We have a lot of days reserved for potential additional meetings to make sure that we can get this done. Also, we've had to amend our public participation policy because we don't have a program, meaning we don't have budget allocations for programming. We will not be able to meet a 60-day public comment period. That does not mean that our public review period won't be thorough and inclusive. We just have to condense it, but in those 25 days, we are going to make just as much of an effort and try to get as much feedback and do as much outreach on the tip as possible. But we did have to change the public review period. But we do think that with some of the new strategies we're using, we'll still be able to get just as much feedback in a shorter amount of time. So related to, why the schedule has been changing, what's happening with this tip update versus what has happened before. Typically, the first step in the tip update would be that the main office determines the federal fund planning targets or allocations for Region 1, which is an 8-county region, and then further suballocates to CDTC, and then in coordination with DOT, and then to AGFTC, the MPO to the north of us. We have not received allocations yet, and part of that, it's in part because of the status of the federal budget. Congressional action is needed for February 18th for fiscal year 2022 appropriations. So we have the infrastructure bill, but we don't have appropriations. So the next step would be that DOT and CDTC staff determine the funding needed for existing TIP projects and regional set-asides, and then the planning committee approves them. Planning committee did review existing TIP projects and approved them on January 12th. However, the regional set-asides will not be discussed or approved until the February 16th planning committee. And usually, depending on the allocations and the fund balance, usually before we even ask for projects, we have a good idea of how much funding will be available to program. We did not have that information this time, but because we knew we needed to adopt a program by June, we opted to solicit for projects in the fall just to understand regional needs. So we are moving forward with the TIP update. We just don't have a lot of information on how much funding is available or the allocation. So, safety versus surface transportation versus national highway system allocation. So all of that information is still up in the air, but as we get the information, we are acting quickly, and all of the information is being made available on our website. The next agenda item is the 2022-2023 UPWP. So you might be like, wow, you guys are crazy. You're updating a TIP and the UPWP at the same time. And you would be correct. No, we've been very busy. So we have presented the draft 2022-2023 UPWP to the planning committee, who approved it to move to a public comment period. So the draft UPWP outlines the tasks for one state fiscal year for CDTC. We usually do a two-year program, but this year we were trying a one-year program. We did a solicitation for projects to try and get an understanding of need and interest in planning initiatives in the region. And then we also collected task proposals from staff who kind of who got their ideas from the various committees like this one that we manage. So some of the key tasks that I wanted to highlight for the 2022-2023 UPWP, these are new, somewhat new or slightly changed tasks. So we will be undertaking an asset management plan for the town of Hoosick and Rensselaer County, a corridor study for Hoosick Road in Brunswick, a complete streets feasibility study for Sand Creek Road here in the village of Colony, Albany and Crane Street linkage study in the city of Schenectady. We will be funding an initiative to develop a health impact assessment tool. This is something that this committee has talked about. We have talked to the county departments of health and the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, and we have developed kind of a broader approach to a health impact assessment. So not just looking at active transportation and the impact of transportation on our on physical activity, but also on access to different treatments and air quality and other impacts to health that transportation has. And we'll be working with the county departments of health and the Regional Planning Commission to develop that. We are going to increase our commitment to resiliency and security planning. This is something that has been stressed. It is an emphasis area with the new administration. So identifying vulnerable infrastructure, and then by the end of next year, scoping a regional resiliency and security planning project. For Capital Coexist, we are continuing the program. It will look different. As you know, every year we've kind of made changes to this program to try and improve it, or to do what, to look back at what projects are most successful or working best. So we've decided to reserve some funding for demonstration projects, and then some funding for working directly with police departments on safety initiatives. And then we are, if you're looking through the UPWP for the terms bike ped planning or bicycle and pedestrian planning, you might not find it. We have renamed it active transportation planning. Again, we are just trying to be more inclusive of new mobility modes and services, all walking, rolling, strolling types of activities. So the draft UPWP is on our website. There's also an executive summary that just sums up the tasks and the costs for each. There will be a virtual public workshop on February 16th at 4:30. And then you can submit comments by email, by text, and then we have a virtual voicemail box. So this is just some of the details on the Capital Coexist program. So like we had mentioned, $20,000 for demonstration projects, $5,000 to support bike skill safety training and maintenance workshops by LCI trainers, and then $15,000 for local police departments. So related to the bike skills training workshops, I'm going to ask Rima to talk a little bit about upcoming planning for Bike to Work Day and Ditch the Car.
Everybody, so Jen, could I share my screen?
You should be a co-host now.
Okay. Let's see if I can get this to work. All right, so can everybody see my title screen? To work, bike to school, ditch the car.
We see your screen, but with it's not in slideshow mode.
That didn't do it, did it?
No, so Sandy had this problem with planning committee, but I think you can just go through
Okay, whatever.
Go through the
It's good enough. Okay, so I'm just going to go through. We have the tentative plans we have. We're starting to put together for bike to work, bike to school, and ditch the car for this year. So just going over our program goals as a refresher. So 4 primary goals for these programs: increasing the visibility of cyclists and cycling by the general public, supporting bike infrastructure, and encouraging interested but concerned cyclists, and educating adults and youth. So the Bike to Work Challenge. So, we did this program, the Bike to Work Challenge. It's been hugely successful. We had a great year in 2019. We were gearing up for an even bigger and better year in 2020, and then COVID hit. So we took a 2-year hiatus, and we're back for 2022. So we are back to planning, back to the drawing board for 2022. And I think it's probably going to be, we're going to do a little bit more of a modest, something more modest in 2022 than what we were planning in 2020, just to kind of, get back into the swing of things. So our tentative plan is to do something in the middle of the week. We were moving forward with pushing the date back a couple of weeks from May into June, and looked into that quite a bit, and ultimately decided to go ahead and sort of pull the trigger on that. And we're going to move forward and try that out this year and see if we get more interest from those interested but concerned riders, those sort of newbie riders, and see if that helps kind of get more of those, sort of less experienced riders out on the road. And also looking to do a finish line event in downtown Albany. For the 2020 year, we developed an automated leaderboard website, and that is ready to launch for this year. So that'll help with the administrative end of things, and should streamline things and make it more fun and easy for everyone. So that's Bike to Work. The Bike to School Challenge, as we've done in the past, that's going to coincide with on the same day as Bike to Work. So we're going to make that on June 1st as well. And it's basically just going to be the same sort of program design as pre-pandemic. So we'll put out a call invitation to all the schools to participate. And we've gotten, Jen, maybe 3 or 4 schools, 5 schools maybe, doing that. So hopefully we'll get, a good group of schools again to come out and participate in that again as well. So last year we put together a Ditch the Car challenge, since we weren't able to do Bike to Work. And this was designed to be to cover all modes and all types of trips, not just work trips that were non-recreational. So errands, social visits, any type of trip that you would take that was for a purpose besides just for the sake of, taking a trip. So not just a bike ride for the sake of a bike ride, but a bike ride to go somewhere for a reason. And we had a pretty good participation. It seemed to be a lot of fun. We got some good feedback. And so we're going to sort of try to piggyback on Bike to Work this year and Bike to School. And so as soon as the Bike to Work and Bike to School week is over, on June 3rd, because the challenge will last that week, we'll start the Ditch the Car challenge, and it'll last through the summer, and it'll end the week of Labor Day. And Jen mentioned this, we're planning some educational programming this year. We've allocated some funding to some safety and maintenance training. So the idea is that we'll be organizing some adult bike safety trainings leading up to the Bike to Work Challenge. So we'll be releasing a call for host entities to be hosting trainings that will help organize. And we're looking to also hold some youth bike safety trainings this spring and fall. And of course, we'll be using link certified instructors for that. And that's it.
Thanks, Rima.
You're welcome.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or anything for Rima on that?
Yeah, this is Jeanette speaking from Saratoga. Rima, I wasn't clear on your finish line event in Albany. What are you envisioning on that? And that's just for is that for the bike to school event? Is that for the bike to work event? What's that for?
That would be for the Bike to Work event. And it would be, it would be outside in one of the, there's multiple like parks and, outdoor public spaces in downtown Albany. I started planning this back in 2020, and I forget which, I identified which park I wanted to hold it in. I don't remember now. I have to go back in my paperwork and find it. But hold it in an outdoor space, set up a tent, invite other entities, advocacy groups and nonprofits and whatnot to come and, if we do t-shirts this year, maybe have the t-shirts available, have a few refreshments and, giveaways and things, and just sort of have a little bit of a celebration there, so when people come in the morning to end their commute, that they, can have a little bit of a festive, celebration to end their morning bike commute. Sort of what you guys do up in Saratoga Springs.
Okay, and then the educational training you were talking about, the adult safety training, are you providing the trainers for that? And are you looking for the host to just have people in their community sign up? What are you envisioning how that's going to work?
Yeah, so we're looking at securing the instructor or instructors, and once we finalize the details, what I'm envisioning is that we would be sending out a call for hosts. So, nonprofits or schools or whoever can step in and say, we have a space and we would be willing to provide the space and advertise the training and, oversee the registration and sort of, and, provide the, buy the food and everything, like sort of organize the event, this one particular event, and then we would provide the instructor and reimburse for the food. So like the host agency would provide the location and sort of recruit the trainees and get the food, and then we would provide the instructor.
Okay, and then one last kind of global question. It goes back to what Jen was saying earlier about changing the name from bike pedestrian, kind of going across the board and changing that to active transportation to be more inclusive. Are we now shifting to active transportation to work, and is everything going to flow that way, or is that like an introductory thought for now and not really formulated as a?
What are you talking about, like the Ditch the Car Challenge, changing the name of the Ditch the Car Challenge?
No, well,
I mean the Bike to Work Challenge, or?
Yeah, because we're trying to be inclusive of all modes, so like skateboarding or however people are now using to get around, are we going to focus on bike pedestrian, or just bike in the future? Are we incorporating, and this is probably more of a question for Jen, are we attempting to incorporate all active transportation now in our dialogue, to try to maybe create or have a culture shift to have it just be active transportation?
So, I mean, we renamed active transportation more from like the planning perspective. Is that like we're planning for all these different mobility devices? However, I mean, bike to work day is, we're following it's a national kind of project, if you will, or a national celebration. But I know at the local level, some communities will have like walk and roll or stroll and roll kind of events so that it is more inclusive. And, those might be like terms that we want to use, or that local communities may want to use as they set up their local events. But I think, to be able to connect to and be part of this larger national bike to work day, we'll probably use bike to work. But it is something to, I guess, keep in mind or just be mindful of as we set up local events.
I mean, if you're talking about these particular, like, specific 3 programs that I just went over, I think bike to work is going to stay bike to work, and at least for now, bike to school is going to stay bike to school. In the fall, there's a National Walk to School Day, which I've been toying with sort of expanding with like a walk and roll event, which is more inclusive, which is sort of like more of an active transportation event instead, which is also more like pretty commonly done in other communities too. It's sort of morphing more into not just walk to school, but a walk and roll event in other communities as well. But, to your point of like going more towards active transportation and not just sort of pigeonholing into just bike or walk. That's one reason why I developed the Ditch the Car campaign, is because it does include all modes of non-SOV transportation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I had a question. As far as like bike safety goes and stuff, we talk about bike safety and like the knowledge of the road and all of this. I've never driven a vehicle, but I mean, it's my knowledge that you only have to take like a written test like once or something, and when you take your written test, you get your driver's license and then you got it, and then you just renew it whenever it expires. But these rules of the road change every so often, and if you're in your 60s or whatever, or 50s, it might have changed from like 20, 30 years ago. And like for instance, yesterday I got in an accident, me versus a car, and I was riding my tricycle, and thank God I had my helmet on because that saved my life. But I mean, these people are not very aware of bicyclists, and I can't ride on the sidewalk, and I ride on the side of the road. We don't always have bike lanes, and when I'm turning, I can't be in the lane if it's a turn lane and I'm going straight, and people just get so pissed off. The city of Albany and the Bike Coalition and Governor's Traffic Safety Committee, I don't remember what year it was, they did a bike safety committee like video two separate videos, and it's about like 12 and a half minutes. And I mean, I think, maybe watching that should be part of like, taking the driver's test, or something like that, because I mean, if not, I mean, at least these, I think some of our towns should have to, maybe we want to, have part of our towns or cities, offer that as far as, adding that onto our, onto like part of our, like a presentation, every so often to make people aware, because like when I was riding my trike, before, I mean, people honked at me like, get the hell out of the road, and said it in different words and stuff. But I mean, I'm just lucky to be alive after what happened yesterday.
Sorry
And
that
I
happened
just
to you,
wanted
darling.
other people's opinions.
That sounds harrowing. And that's a sort of a big reason why we have the Capital Coexist campaign.
Mhm.
I mean, right, Jen? That's,
Yeah,
why we have
do.
Capital Coexist.
right. We do, through Capital Coexist, try to do messaging for motorists. It was really started to, aim messaging at motorists, since most safety messaging is aimed towards, bicyclists or pedestrians, but, kind of reminding motorists that bicycles and pedestrians have a right to be there, and that, that they have a special responsibility, and that the onus is on them to be safe users and sharers of the road. So we continue to do that. We know it's not easy out there. And we also continue to use Capital Coexist to do things like education and training for local governments that are interested, so that we, design better facilities, and that we're not just relying on, individuals to make good decisions all the time. Are there any other questions about bike to work or ditch the car? Okay, so Rima will keep us updated as planning for those continue. The next agenda item is the ADA transition plans. Carrie's not here today. We were going to just do an update from last month on that project, but that'll have to wait for March. New Visions training, the next webinar is scheduled for February 22nd. And it will be on air quality and transportation planning and modeling. So if you're wondering how CDTC determines the impact of transportation projects on air quality, we will go through that step by step and how the model is used. We also have some folks from DEC that will be presenting on how they monitor air quality in their communities. As always, we are accepting any requests for virtual training on New Visions. You'll see in the draft UPWP that we're using this next year to plan for and gear up for the next New Visions update, which, you probably, just like me, feel like we just adopted this new plan, but it is almost time to update it again. We update it every 5 years, and this was adopted in 2020, and it takes several years to develop. We are looking to do, kind of some more significant changes to New Visions. Over the years, we've kept the same name. We've kind of enhanced, expanded upon really, some core philosophies and strategies in there, but so much has changed between technology and lifestyle and just preferences for, there are modes that exist now that did not exist when we started doing our long range plan, and there are more opportunities and development has definitely changed. So by the end of this UPWP, so March 2023, we hope to have a scope for the next New Visions update, which will be a real wholesale redo probably of the long range plan. So everyone should have received the project status spreadsheet. So I'm not going to go through each project individually. You have these spreadsheets, you can take a look and let us know if you have any questions. But you know, we do have a lot of linkage studies and other regional projects that we are currently managing and supporting, and they're all moving forward. And as we have new staff people on board, we hope to be able to wrap some of these up and start some new initiatives, because as you'll see in the UPWP, it's a lot of, you know, it's ambitious and we have a lot of work to do, but we like doing it and providing the information and service to the region. So we will keep on going. So with that, we have a couple of minutes. If anyone has an update that they would like to share, that their organization is working on, a project or an event that's upcoming, please feel free to share it. Charles?
Good morning, everyone. This is Charles Welge with the Albany County Department of Health. And I wanted to just provide people with an update. Periodically, local health departments and hospitals are required by the state to do a community health needs assessment and subsequently identify priorities. And the next cycle of that planning is for the period 2023 through 2025. And among the priorities that the hospitals and the local health departments in Rensselaer and Albany counties have identified includes obesity and its related risk factors, and certainly physical activity and the appropriateness of active transportation is woven into that. So in this next few months, both Albany and Rensselaer counties will be soliciting ideas and input for implementation strategies of active transportation, and certainly look to the guidance of CDTC and this group to assist in that.
Anyone else have an organization update?
Hey, Jen,
Hey,
John
Jen.
Gillivan. Hey, that's great news that the Sand Creek Road Complete Street Feasibility Study for the Village of Colony is at least now on the ledger, or at least where it's being considered. I'm not sure if you remember seeing the email I sent. Paul Winkkeller, who's the ex-president of the New York Bicycling Coalition, sent out a NYSERDA, first ever. New York State's looking for actually input from cyclists. It's called the New York State Cycle Census. And I highly recommend anyone who needs the link to it to take it. A lot of it has to do with transportation. How do you get from your home to work with the help of either CDTA Bus Plus, mount your bike on the bus or whatever else. But it could also be, you know, for you going shopping or going to get the Empire State Trail. I mean, so it's a first ever. Someone thought it would be a good idea to get feedback from cyclists. Who knew? So I think that people should take advantage of this and give their input. I pass around to all my local cycling friends in the Capital Region, but if you need me to send that again, I can do that, Jen.
Yeah, if you could send that again or put the link in the chat, that would be great.
Yes, I can do that. Yep.
Just,
And then just a side note, I'm not sure how involved CDTC is with this, Keeler Motor Car is building basically a whole new campus or university on Route 7. And the bottom line is that for over a year, there's been discussions about maybe making a connector down to the Empire State Trail for the British American Boulevard intersection of Route 7. I was involved over a year ago with Sean McGuire and Zach Harrison, the engineer at Town of Colony. And bottom line is that there's a development of homes that is making a stink. They get a lawyer, because that's what people do in New York. They get high-priced lawyers to scare people. So they scared the Town of Colony in Keeler to drop basically not only their access road for test cars down the River Road to avoid Route 7 entrance and exit, but also the multi-use path, which would be a connector, a major connector, the Albany County connector on British American Boulevard and points south to the Pine Bush and City of Albany. So we're collaborating, Albany Bicycle Coalition, Save Colony, we're all collaborating to try to get some audience with the Honorable Peter Crummy, the new supervisor for the Town of Colony, that we've been unsuccessful at doing that. And the planning board meeting, we did have some representation, and we had two speakers, and they basically they didn't show a lot of interest. But this is in the Capital District Trails Plan, so we as a group, we're getting more and more people on board. We're going to need some, and I'm sure what your involvement can be, Jen, with CDTC, but we need a little, maybe some, not arm twisting, but at least some people that from CDTC that will at least say that this would make some sense. Because after this Keeler Maserati, Beamer, who else are they going to put? They put Lamborghinis in here. As soon as they get this campus done, we're going to miss our opportunity to take advantage of this property that goes all the way down to River Road. So we've got three options, and we'd like to, we're not going to drop this. We're going to put a lot of pressure on the Town of Colony to revisit this. But the excuse, there was no excuse, there was no explanation why they just dropped it, other than I think the lawyers from this development off River Road. So if anyone ever has tried to take Rosendale down to the Empire State Trail from Route 7, you got to have a lot of patience, a lot of it's not bike friendly, it's not pedestrian friendly, it's not even car friendly. But in any event, so that's I just want to give you a heads up, and we may be looking for some assistance if you are allowed to give assistance on providing, or if I'm not sure if you're involved with that Keeler Motor car expansion project.
So thanks for the update. I was familiar with the project last year, and I did not know the status. The regional trails plan identifies that as a link. CDTC, we don't have any authority. Having that in the plan is our way of communicating. And if the town reaches out to us, we'd be happy to provide some assistance or work with them. But we definitely, we can't intervene on, if it's development or any of that. But, if the town is looking for assistance or information, we would be happy to provide that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's kind of what we figured.
Mm-hmm.
We figured that you would have to take a kind of a backseat approach, or not an aggressive approach, but it's I tell you, living in the Town of Colony for as many years as I have, it's we'll see if Crummey's any better than Brazil or Mahan, but it seems to be it's a politically run company, run town. They don't really they talk one thing, but then the developers either line the pockets or whatever else goes on. We all know how things are being done in the town of Colony, and there's a lot of stuff that's got to get done, and hopefully Crummy will see the light, and he'll give us at least an opportunity to discuss this. But there's going to be a lot of pressure. We're going to get businesses along Route 7. We've got other organizations, Friends of Mohawk. We're putting the push on this.
Okay,
really
John,
hard.
I just want to remind you that, I mean, this is not the place for
I
that.
understand that. I understand it, but
I understand what you're doing with your advocacy organization, but this is not.
Yep. I'm just telling you my frustration, Jen, that we have a lot of people on the call here, and I'm sure they run across the same thing, is that, people have got to listen to the people actually ride a bike or walk or have to maneuver. I mean, there's not enough feedback. It's always one-sided. I'm not sure about your committee either. If you have any cyclists on your committee, the CDTC advisory committee, but I think it's very top heavy as well, with a lot of people that, are politicians, and you don't have real users. You need advocacy people that really know.
Right. That's why we have this advisory committee, John. The planning committee, it's structured with elected officials because we're following federal legislation, and that's who's supposed to be on it to make programming decisions. They're all open to the public. And I do appreciate your comments. I just want to let you know that. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any more organization updates? All right, the one last information I wanted to provide to everyone, I apologize. We are having some technology issues at CDTC. So if you've received some spam or spoof-like email from me or anyone at CDTC, I apologize. We are trying to figure out what happened, and we're in the process of moving, I don't know the technical, the IT words for it, but moving our servers, changing our operating system. So apologies. But as always, please feel free to send an email. We have multiple public comment opportunities right now. So please check our website. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 8th, 9 a.m. And Jack Mance from AGFTC will join us briefly in the meeting to give us a little bit of an update on what's going on up in Warren and Washington counties. I know that was something that was requested, and we'll also have a presentation. So until then, I hope everyone stays safe and warm, and I will see you all in March.